When Kody Brown stepped onto the set of Special Forces' World's Toughest Test, nobody could have predicted what would happen next. The reality television patriarch, known for over a decade of deflecting blame and justifying his questionable choices, did something that left millions of viewers absolutely stunned. He broke down completely. And we're not talking about a few carefully placed tears or a brief moment of manufactured vulnerability for the cameras. This was a full-scale emotional meltdown where Kody sobbed openly, his voice cracking with what appeared to be genuine anguish, as he admitted something that seemed impossible coming from his mouth. He was primarily responsible for being estranged from 18 of his own children. 18 children. Let those numbers sink in for a moment. This isn't one or two kids going through a rebellious phase or having typical parent-child conflicts. This is nearly an entire generation of offspring who have actively chosen to distance themselves from their father. And for the first time in Sister Wives history, Kody appeared to understand why. During the show's brutally intense interrogation sequences, something remarkable happened. Kody didn't just admit to making a few mistakes here and there. He didn't offer the usual vague acknowledgments that things could have been handled differently. He took full, unequivocal accountability. The words that came out of his mouth shocked longtime viewers to their core. He said he should have had stronger relationships with his kids. He acknowledged, without deflection or excuse, that he was the problem. The cameras captured raw emotion that seemed absolutely impossible to fake. His voice didn't just crack, it shattered. Tears didn't just well up, they streamed down his face in torrents. And he appeared genuinely, devastatingly broken by the reality of what he had lost. For fans who have watched Sister Wives religiously for years, witnessing Kody deflect responsibility at absolutely every turn, watching him blame his ex-wives, the show itself, polygamy as a lifestyle, COVID protocols, and even his own children for the family's destruction, this moment felt monumental. It felt like maybe, just maybe, after all these years of denial and delusion, he was finally getting it. The breakthrough seemed real because the environment made it impossible to hide. The directing staff on Special Forces pushed him relentlessly, attacking his vulnerabilities with surgical precision. And for once in his life, Kody didn't fight back with his arsenal of excuses and explanations. He simply owned it. He sat there, physically and emotionally depleted, and took responsibility for destroying his relationships with his children. But here's where this story takes a turn that nobody saw coming, or perhaps, if we're being honest, a turn that everyone who knows Kody Brown should have seen coming from a mile away. Viewers across every social media platform started buzzing with a question that seemed almost too hopeful to ask out loud. Had this extreme environment finally cracked through Kody's carefully constructed defenses? Maybe being pushed to his absolute physical and mental limits, being stripped of all the protective layers he'd built up over years of failed relationships and public criticism, had finally broken through to something real. Maybe this was the breakthrough his estranged children desperately needed to see. Maybe, for the first time in their lives, they could witness their father taking genuine accountability for the pain he'd caused them. The Special Forces finale aired on November 20th, 2025, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media lit up with reactions that ranged from cautious optimism to genuine hope. Longtime critics of Kody Brown found themselves in the unfamiliar position of wondering if redemption might actually be possible. After all, growth has to start somewhere, right? And what better catalyst than this extreme experience? This moment of complete vulnerability, captured in front of millions of viewers, stripped of all the usual reality TV polish and strategic spin that has defined Sister Wives for so many years. The conversation surrounding Kody shifted dramatically. Instead of the usual mockery and criticism, people were actually discussing the possibility of redemption. Podcasters who had spent years dissecting his failures wondered aloud if this could be the turning point. Sister Wives fan communities debated whether his children should give him another chance now that he seemed to finally understand what he'd done wrong. It was a remarkable shift in public perception, one that Kody Brown had never experienced before in his reality television career. But here's the thing about Kody Brown that his ex-wives learned the hard way over decades, and that his children have learned through years of disappointment and broken promises. Just when you think you've witnessed genuine accountability, just when you start believing that maybe this time is different, that maybe he's finally capable of real growth and change, he finds a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And what happened next was simultaneously so predictable for anyone who knows Kody's patterns, yet still somehow shocking in its sheer audacity and complete lack of self-awareness. Because Kody Brown wasn't done telling his story. Not even close. In fact, he was about to do something that would completely rewrite the entire narrative in a way that would make those tears seem less like genuine remorse and more like an Oscar-worthy, calculated performance. Here's where the story goes from disappointing to absolutely wild, and the timeline is crucial to understanding just how calculated Kody's behavior truly was. The Special Forces finale hadn't even been on the air for a full week when Kody Brown decided to pull the rug out from under everyone who had witnessed his emotional breakdown. In fact, let's be crystal clear about the sequence of events here, because the timing reveals everything you need to know about Kody's true intentions. Just 2 days before the finale aired, on November 18th, 2025, Kody sat down for an interview with Good Day New York. And what he said during that appearance would completely, utterly, and irrevocably obliterate everything viewers thought they had witnessed during his Special Forces interrogation. Gone was the sobbing father who had taken full responsibility for losing his children. Vanished was the broken man who had admitted he should have done better, who had acknowledged his failures without excuse or deflection. Instead, Kody showed up with a brand new story, one where his tearful confession wasn't real at all. According to him, it was strategy. It was performance. It was, in his own words, exactly what the producers and directing staff wanted to hear. The timeline here is absolutely crucial to understanding the depth of calculation involved. Kody filmed his Good Day New York interview before the Special Forces finale even aired to the public. That means he was already spinning his reversal, already crafting his backtrack, already preparing his damage control before viewers had even seen his supposed big moment of accountability. He knew what was coming. He knew that millions of people were about to watch him break down and take responsibility for devastating his children, and he was getting ahead of it with damage control that would make any seasoned politician jealous. During the Good Day New York interview, Kody laid out what he called his confession strategy, with the kind of casual confidence that suggests he genuinely didn't understand how damning his explanation sounded. He claimed he felt like the only military way to manage the interrogation situation was to take full responsibility, even if he was only partly culpable. He explained that he went into those intense conversations thinking that complete ownership was what the directing staff wanted from him. So that's what he gave them: full ownership, full accountability, the whole emotional package, complete with tears and voice cracks and visible anguish. But according to Kody, none of it represented genuine reflection or real remorse. It was tactical maneuvering. It was him reading the room and delivering the performance he believed would satisfy the interrogators and get them off his back. The sheer audacity of this reversal is genuinely staggering when you sit with it for a moment. Kody essentially admitted, on camera, to a completely different audience, that his entire emotional breakdown was nothing more than acting, that the tears that seemed so genuine were actually calculated, that every single word of accountability was a carefully crafted performance designed to satisfy what he believed were the show's expectations and the directing staff's demands. He wasn't being vulnerable. He wasn't having a breakthrough. He wasn't finally confronting the reality of his failures as a father. He was being strategic, and now, for reasons that only make sense in Kody Brown's mind, he wanted everyone to know it. But wait, because Kody didn't stop there. He couldn't just leave it at admitting his accountability was fake. No, he had to go full reversal mode, stating plainly and without any apparent awareness of how terrible this sounded, that in reality, the blame for the family's destruction had to be shared with his ex-wives. He couldn't possibly be the only one culpable for the family falling apart. Everybody else had to take responsibility too. The ex-wives, Christine, Janelle, and Meri, all had to take partial responsibility for what happened. It was a complete 180-degree turn from what viewers had just witnessed on their screens during Special Forces. And here's what makes this reversal so particularly galling. The nerve of walking back tears that seemed so genuine, so raw, so impossible to fake, is something that only Kody Brown could pull off with a completely straight face. And he did it with the kind of confidence that makes you genuinely wonder if he actually believes his own spin, or if he's simply that committed to never, ever admitting genuine fault for anything. Now let's dig into the specific excuse Kody Brown crafted to explain away his emotional breakdown, because this isn't just simple backtracking or changing his mind. This is a masterclass in rewriting your own emotional breakdown as some kind of tactical genius move, some calculated decision made by a strategic mastermind, rather than what it actually appeared to be. A broken father finally confronting his failures. Kody told the Good Day New York hosts that he adopted what he perceived as a military mindset during his time on Special Forces. And in his interpretation of how military personnel operate, that meant taking full responsibility even when you're only partly to blame. Listen carefully to how he framed this explanation, because the language reveals everything. He said, "I felt like the only military way to manage this is to take full responsibility, even if you're only partly culpable. Say you're fully culpable. It's just like ownership." He elaborated that he went into the whole experience with a specific strategic approach, thinking to himself, yeah, I was the problem. I was the one that made a mistake. But here's the absolutely crucial part that Kody wants everyone to understand. He's now openly admitting that this was purely strategic thinking, not actual belief. He didn't genuinely think he was fully responsible for losing 18 children. He was just saying what he calculated would get him through the interrogation with the least amount of continued pressure and discomfort. Kody's core argument, the foundation of his entire reversal, is that he only made these admissions because he believed this was what the directing staff wanted to hear from him. It was performative, a show within a show. He thought he was playing the game correctly by giving them the accountability they seemed to be aggressively pushing for. In his mind, breaking down and sobbing wasn't about genuine remorse or real self-reflection about his failures as a father. It was about reading the room, understanding what his interrogators expected, and delivering exactly that to make them stop pushing him. The sheer calculation required for this explanation is absolutely breathtaking when you really think about it. Kody wants us to believe that in his most vulnerable moments, when he was stripped down emotionally, physically exhausted from days of brutal challenges, sleep-deprived, and pushed beyond his limits, he still had enough presence of mind, enough strategic thinking ability to carefully craft what was essentially a false confession. That his tears, which looked so genuine, were actually tactical. That his voice breaking with emotion was part of the performance. That admitting he had failed 18 of his own children was just him playing along with what he calculated the show wanted, rather than any genuine confrontation with reality. But let's pause and really think about what Kody is claiming here, because the implications are actually more damning than he seems to realize. He's claiming that even under extreme duress, even when pushed to what appeared to be his absolute breaking point, even when the directing staff was exploiting every vulnerability they could identify, he was still in enough control, still strategic enough, still calculated enough to fake the entire thing. That's either an admission of being an incredibly skilled manipulator who can manufacture genuine seeming emotion even under the most extreme circumstances, or it's a desperate attempt to take back accountability that felt too real, too raw, too much like actual growth in the moment. So now that Kody has established that his tears were fake and his accountability was nothing more than strategic theater, he needs someone else to blame for the destruction of his family. And naturally, predictably, he turned his sights squarely on the women he spent decades married to. The same women who raised his 18 children, often as single mothers while he rotated between households. The same women who stayed loyal for years, who defended him publicly, who tried to make plural marriage work even as he increasingly favored Robyn above all others. Now, suddenly, according to Kody's revised narrative, they're the ones who need to share the blame for everything that went wrong. Kody stated it plainly during his Good Day New York appearance, with the kind of confidence that suggests he genuinely believes what he's saying. But in all reality, the blame is to be shared with ex-wives. We broke up as a family. I can't be the only one that's culpable for that. Everybody else has to take responsibility. The ex-wives have to take partial responsibility. Notice the language shift here, because it's crucial to understanding Kody's pattern. He went from full, complete, unequivocal accountability during Special Forces, I am the problem, I made the mistakes, I failed my children, to demanding that his ex-wives take their share of the blame. Christine, Janelle, Meri, they all need to own their part in this mess, according to Kody's new version of events. But wait, because it gets even better, even more divorced from the reality that Sister Wives viewers have watched unfold for over a decade. Kody dropped another bombshell claim during this interview, one that flies directly in the face of everything viewers have witnessed season after season. He declared, without apparent irony or self-awareness, that all my children had a great relationship with me until the divorces. Let that statement marinate for a second, because it's genuinely stunning in its revisionist audacity. Kody is claiming that everything was wonderful between him and his kids until the marriages fell apart. that the estrangements only happened because the family structure broke up and the children were forced into the impossible position of choosing sides. According to Kody's carefully constructed narrative, his children were victims of what he called a very nasty multiple-layer divorce. They were naturally closer to their mothers because of the polygamous family structure where kids spend more time with their moms. So, of course, when everything fell apart, they gravitated toward Christine, Janelle, and Meri. It wasn't his fault they rejected him, it was the divorce that forced them into these impossible positions where they had no choice but to pick their moms over their dad. This narrative is so carefully constructed, so conveniently self-serving, that it almost sounds believable if you haven't been paying the slightest bit of attention to sister wives for the past several years. Kody paints himself as a victim of circumstance, a loving father who had wonderful relationships with all his children until external forces, mainly the divorces that he had no control over, tore everything apart through no fault of his own. But there's one massive, glaring problem with Kody's timeline that completely demolishes his carefully crafted excuse. And Sister Wives fans who have actually been paying attention know exactly why his story is complete and utter fabrication. Let's talk about when these estrangements actually began, because the truth doesn't match Kody's convenient narrative at all. Most of Kody's children started pulling away from him during COVID-19, during the pandemic. That's years before his divorces were finalized. Christine announced her split from Kody in late 2021. Janelle's separation was confirmed publicly in 2022. Meri's official divorce didn't happen until January 2023. But the damage with his kids, that was already catastrophically done long before any of those relationships officially ended, long before divorce papers were filed or public announcements were made. During the pandemic, viewers watched in real time as Kody implemented incredibly strict COVID rules that conveniently, almost suspiciously, allowed him to spend the vast majority of his time at Robyn's house while barely visiting his other wives and children. He created impossible standards and protocols that his other families couldn't possibly meet given their circumstances, then used their supposed non-compliance as justification for staying away from them entirely. Kids who desperately wanted to see their father, who were struggling through one of the most difficult periods in modern history, were told they weren't following the rules correctly, weren't being safe enough, weren't taking the virus seriously enough. Meanwhile, Kody was comfortably settled in with Robyn and her children, acting as though they were the only family that mattered, the only ones worth protecting. Gabriel Brown, one of Janelle's sons, broke down on camera in scenes that were genuinely heartbreaking to watch. He talked openly about how his father had completely abandoned him during one of the hardest times of his life. He was a young man navigating the confusion and isolation of a global pandemic, desperately wanting connection with his father, and instead receiving nothing but criticism about rule following and rejection. Garrison, Gabriel's brother, who tragically passed away in 2024, spoke candidly about feeling utterly rejected by his father during this period. These weren't adult children reacting to divorce drama or being influenced by bitter ex-wives to turn against their father. These were teenagers and young adults, watching their father actively choose one household over all the others, and coming up with increasingly flimsy excuses about safety protocols and COVID rules to justify his choice. The estrangement started then, during the pandemic, not after the divorces, as Kody now claims. The truth that Kody refuses to acknowledge is that his kids watched him pick sides years before any divorce papers were filed. They watched him prioritize Robyn's comfort and Robyn's children over everyone else's basic emotional needs. They watched him create distance, then blame them for not trying hard enough to bridge that distance, despite his impossible requirements. They saw exactly who their father really was when he thought he had a legitimate excuse for his favoritism, and they made their choices about their relationship with him based entirely on his behavior, not their mother's influence. So let's talk about what actually happened during Kody's time on Special Forces, World's Toughest Test, because understanding the reality of that experience makes his subsequent backtracking even more damning. This wasn't your typical reality TV environment where producers could edit around unflattering moments or where contestants could control their image through careful performance. This was deliberately brutal, intentionally designed to strip away all pretense. And it revealed sides of Kody Brown that even longtime Sister Wives viewers hadn't fully seen before in quite this raw a format. The physical toll on Kody was immediate and severe. He tore his hamstring on just day 3 of filming. The injury developed into a bruise the size of an actual fist on the back of his knee. The pain was intense and constant, but according to Kody himself in subsequent interviews, the mental toll was significantly harder than the physical challenges. He admitted he started to seriously fade around day 5 or 6, despite going into the competition genuinely fit and feeling optimistic about his chances. But perhaps more revealing than his physical struggles was how he behaved with his fellow competitors. Kody was irritating his peers almost immediately upon arrival, and that's putting it extremely mildly. His co-star, Brianna Chicken Fry LaPaglia, spent more time with Kody than anyone else on the show. They were paired up for nearly every challenge, shared car rides between locations, and ended up bunking next to each other in the barracks. And Brianna developed some very strong opinions about Kody Brown that would become a major plot point in the show. During her own interrogation sequence, when asked about her fellow competitors, Brianna called Kody creepy without hesitation. She also mentioned, with the kind of bluntness that reality TV desperately needs more of, that he stunk because he wasn't wearing deodorant. Someone had to say it, and Brianna stepped up to that plate. The hygiene issue became this bizarre, almost comedic running storyline throughout Kody's time on the show. He later explained his reasoning in a way that somehow made it worse. He didn't bring deodorant because he didn't think they'd have access to showers. As the oldest competitor there, he was always last in the shower rotation when they did have facilities. He claimed he didn't want to get called out by the directing staff for taking too long in the shower, so his solution was to just not shower for several days at a time. When Brianna finally confronted him directly about the smell, Kody had to borrow deodorant from fellow contestant Andrew East. According to reports, it didn't help much. He still had a noticeable odor throughout filming, but the hygiene drama was absolutely nothing compared to what happened during the interrogation sequences, and this is where things get truly revealing about Kody's character. The directing staff, who are trained in actual military interrogation techniques, quickly identified Kody's vulnerabilities and exploited them with surgical precision. They noticed something particularly interesting about his behavior. He responded completely differently to female interrogators versus male ones. When a woman questioned him, Kody shut down almost completely. His jaw would clench, he would refuse to speak, and he claimed his personal life was too private to discuss this from a man who's aired his family drama on national television for over a decade. But with male interrogators, suddenly, Kody opened up. He went along with cover stories, seemed almost comfortable, engaged in the back and forth that the challenge required. The directing staff, recognizing this pattern, used it as a weapon. They brought Kody and Brianna outside and poured dirty water over Kody's head, telling him it was because she had called him creepy. Then they switched, pouring water over Brianna while Kody watched. The interrogator asked him point blank, "Are you enjoying watching a woman suffer? Because I think that's what you like." The implication was devastating and pointed. The directing staff had identified something in Kody's behavior, in his pattern of shutting down around authoritative women while watching his female teammates suffer consequences, and they called it out directly on camera. And here's what makes Kody's subsequent claim that all of this was strategic performance so impossible to believe. If you watch those interrogation scenes, if you see his reactions in real time, they don't look calculated. They look like genuine responses from someone whose deepest psychological issues are being exploited by people who are trained to do exactly that. When Kody Brown's Good Day New York interview started making the rounds on social media and entertainment news sites, the reaction from Sister Wives fans and Special Forces viewers was swift, unified, and absolutely brutal. The collective response ranged from deep disappointment to outright fury to that specific kind of exhausted frustration that comes from watching someone snatch defeat from the jaws of victory for what feels like the millionth time. Reddit became ground zero for the backlash, almost immediately. Users on the Sister Wives subreddit, who have been documenting Kody's patterns of behavior for years, didn't hold back in their assessments. They called his Special Forces accountability exactly what it looked like in hindsight: performative, calculated, and ultimately meaningless. These were fans who had seen this exact pattern before. Kody says something that sounds like genuine growth or accountability, gets praise or positive attention for it, then immediately walks it back the moment he realizes it might require actual change or sustained self-reflection. The consensus across multiple platforms was remarkably unified, which rarely happens in fandoms that are usually divided on every possible interpretation. Kody Brown had been handed a genuine chance at redemption, a real opportunity to start rebuilding relationships with his estranged children by simply maintaining the accountability he'd shown on special forces. Instead, he did what he apparently cannot help but do. He blamed everyone else, minimized his own responsibility, and expected people to accept his new version of events without question. What made the backlash particularly intense was the cruelty of what Kody had done, perhaps, without even realizing it. His children, Mykelti, Gabriel, Gwendolyn, Savannah, and others had watched their father's special forces break down. Some of them had felt, for perhaps the first time in years, a glimmer of hope that maybe their dad was finally understanding what he'd done to them. Mykelti had even mentioned on her Patreon that watching her father take accountability made her want to return his phone calls to give reconciliation another chance. And then, within days of that episode airing, their father went on television and announced that the whole thing was fake, that his tears were strategic, that his accountability was just him playing a role, saying what he thought the directing staff wanted to hear. Imagine being one of Kody's children and processing that information. Imagine feeling that brief spark of hope that maybe your father had finally broken through his denial, only to have him publicly announce that, no, actually, it was all performance art. The mockery online was relentless but entirely deserved. People joked about what Kody's next excuse might be, speculating that he'd eventually claim the entire Sister Wives series had been an elaborate acting exercise and none of his marriages were ever real. Others wondered, with genuine concern, how his children would react to watching this interview, whether they would feel validated in their decisions to keep him at arm's length, or whether it would simply reopen old wounds. Media outlets covering reality television picked up the story quickly, and notably, none of them were buying what Kody was attempting to sell. The narrative across entertainment journalism was clear and consistent. Kody Brown had fumbled yet another opportunity for genuine growth and healing. And this time, he'd done it spectacularly, publicly, with millions of witnesses to his complete inability to maintain accountability for more than a few days. Despite walking back every single ounce of accountability he displayed on special forces, despite admitting his breakdown was strategic performance rather than genuine emotion, Kody Brown still insists he's reaching out to his estranged children and trying to repair their relationships. He wants everyone to know he's making efforts, doing the hard work of reaching out to kids who want nothing to do with him, attempting to be the father he should have been all along. And technically, he's not completely lying about making contact. His daughter, Mykelti, has confirmed publicly that yes, Kody has reached out to her multiple times since his special forces appearance. So, in the most literal sense, he's telling the truth about making contact and attempting communication. But there's a massive, crucial caveat that Kody conveniently leaves out of his redemption narrative, one that reveals exactly why his efforts aren't actually accomplishing anything meaningful. Mykelti has made it crystal clear, in multiple public statements, that she will not fully reconcile with her father unless he makes genuine, sustained efforts with all of her siblings. She's called herself a package deal, and she absolutely means it. This isn't a casual boundary or a negotiating position. This is Mykelti telling her father that he needs to be a real father to all of his children, not just cherry-pick the relationships that are easier or more convenient or more receptive to his overtures. Think about what Mykelti is actually asking for here, because it's not unreasonable or vindictive. She's not demanding perfection or expecting her father to magically fix decades of damage overnight. She's simply requiring that he put in genuine effort across the board with all of his children, not just the ones who make him feel good about himself or who are most likely to forgive him quickly. She's demanding consistency, genuine change, sustained effort, exactly the kind of accountability that Kody claimed to embrace on special forces, then immediately rejected in his Good Day New York interview. This is precisely the kind of real accountability that Kody apparently cannot sustain. His approach to reconciliation follows the same pattern as everything else in his life. He wants credit for trying without actually doing the hard, uncomfortable, sustained work that real change requires. He reaches out to the children who are most receptive, gets rejected or given conditions he doesn't want to meet, then uses that rejection as evidence that his children are the real problem. See? I tried. They wouldn't let me back in. I extended the olive branch and they rejected it. What more can I possibly do? What's particularly telling about Kody's claims of making efforts is that he's saying all of this while simultaneously doing everything possible to undermine any genuine reconciliation. He's publicly announcing that his tearful accountability was fake and strategic. He's blaming the children's mothers for the estrangements. He's insisting that the divorces forced his kids to choose sides, rather than acknowledging his own behavior drove them away. Every single one of these actions makes reconciliation harder, not easier, and his children are watching all of it happen in real time. So the question isn't really whether Kody Brown is trying to reconcile with his children. The question is whether he's capable of the kind of genuine, sustained, uncomfortable accountability that real reconciliation would require. And based on everything we've seen, especially his rapid backtracking after Special Forces, the answer appears to be a resounding no. So let's step back and look at the bigger picture here. Because Kody Brown's Special Forces breakdown and subsequent reversal isn't just about one interview or one backtracked confession, or even one man's inability to maintain accountability. This represents a pattern that defines who Kody Brown is at his absolute core, and what it reveals should be deeply troubling for anyone who was hoping he might actually change, grow, or become the father his 18 estranged children have desperately needed him to be for years. Kody had what can only be described as a golden opportunity practically handed to him on Special Forces. The show pushed him to his absolute physical and mental limits, stripped away his usual defenses and deflections, put him in an environment where his typical excuses wouldn't work, and something real appeared to break through during those interrogations. For one powerful moment captured on camera, viewers witnessed what seemed like genuine accountability, raw, unfiltered emotion from a father finally confronting the devastating reality that he had lost 18 children and, for once, acknowledging his role in that catastrophic loss. It was powerful precisely because it felt impossible for Kody to fake under those extreme circumstances. The tears seemed too real, the emotion too raw, the vulnerability too complete to be anything but genuine breakthrough. But within literally days of that episode airing, Kody proved that apparently nothing is impossible to fake when your ego and your need to be right are on the line. According to his own words, the tears were strategic calculations. The confession was carefully crafted performance. The accountability was nothing more than theater designed to get interrogators to stop pushing him. And now he's right back to his default setting, blaming ex-wives and divorces and circumstances completely beyond his control for problems that are fundamentally, at their core, about his own choices and his own behavior and his own failures as a father and husband. What this pattern tells us, what Kody has proven beyond any shadow of doubt, is that he is psychologically incapable of maintaining genuine accountability when it requires sustained vulnerability or discomfort. He can perform remorse when he calculates it serves his immediate interests. He can cry on command if the situation seems to demand it. He can say all the right words about taking responsibility when he's backed into a corner. But the absolute moment that accountability becomes uncomfortable, the moment it requires him to sit with genuine shame or admit he fundamentally failed in his most important role as a father, he retreats immediately into blame, excuses, and revisionist history that makes him the victim rather than the perpetrator. And here's the truly devastating part that should break the heart of anyone who cares about those 18 estranged children. Every time Kody does this, every single time he walks back accountability or blames his ex-wives or claims his children victimized him by rejecting him, he makes genuine reconciliation less possible. His kids aren't stupid, they're watching him prove over and over again that he hasn't changed, that he fundamentally cannot change, that the version of their father they've been grieving and trying to move past is actually exactly who he is at his core. The truth is that Kody Brown's Special Forces meltdown and his subsequent reversal might be the most honest thing he's done in years, not because his tears were real, but because his backtracking showed everyone, including his children, exactly who he is when the cameras stop rolling and the praise stops coming. He's a man more committed to protecting his fragile ego than rebuilding his shattered family. He's a father who would rather rewrite painful history than face it honestly. And until that fundamental truth about his character changes, 18 children will continue keeping their distance not because they're cruel or unforgiving or influenced by bitter mothers, but because they're protecting themselves from a man who has proven time and time and time again that his version of love comes with conditions and prerequisites they can no longer afford to meet. Drop your thoughts below. Do you think Kody's children will ever reconcile with him, or has he burned those bridges permanently with his inability to maintain genuine accountability? Hit that like button, subscribe to stay updated on this ongoing family drama, and stay tuned because the next video is coming soon and you definitely won't want to miss what's next in the Brown family saga.